Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. Burlington, and it is once again an absolute pleasure to have you join us on this very, very special show. We are here talking about how we arrived at this point. This is our centennial, our 100th show with BCAT. A great big thank you to BCAT, a great big thank you to Chris, who has been involved, as well as all of the other people who have been concerned with helping us produce this show. What have we accomplished in 100 shows? What have we done? Where have we been? There are just so many things that I think that we can talk about. And when I say we, I'm talking about the people who are the founders of this show, the people who are directly responsible, minus one who had to be away, and that's Adam Sinisi. Other than that, the four people here have been instrumental in putting on the 100 shows, which date back to May of 2014. We're currently carrying on a little conversation with regard to prospectus for the future, our intentions, some problems and whatnot. But most important, right now, I want you to know the people, or I would like to have you be introduced to the people, let them introduce themselves to you and tell you a little bit about who they are, their ties to Burlington and to the show, and take from that point on to talk about Burlington, to talk about the world, to talk about us individually, to talk about just about anything and everything that has to do with us as we have become affiliated with the show. And we'll begin with, on my right or on my left is Joan Kennedy Constant. Hi, Joan. Welcome, and it's
Hi,
so
Pat.
good to
Thanks
see
for
you
having
again.
me on. I'm not one of the founders of the show, unfortunately, but I've been active in dribs and drabs.
Yeah, but you're close enough. You're close enough. You've been here for a while with us, and we've thoroughly enjoyed your commentary and the fact that you have many times produced the show for us, worked the cameras, worked in the background, and that has been extremely helpful, and I personally appreciate it very, very much.
And on top of that, Joan, also being a guest a few times.
In dribs and drabs. I much prefer, frankly, to be behind the camera, doing what Frank the Tank is doing right now, or Mary Ann Gerard in the booth directing.
We
Yes.
prefer you
But
out there.
on occasion,
Yeah, you know, I'm glad you said that.
I can be tied to a chair and made to talk.
Who is Mary Ann Gerard? Paul's wife is currently producing the show. Frank Reyes is on the camera, and Chris Flaherty is running around and making sure that everything
Making
works.
things happen, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's
So
producing
tell
this.
us about yourself. Tell us about what you do, where you go,
Where I do,
what you
what I
like about the show, anything and everything that you can think of.
Well, for the few moments that I have, again, yeah, my name is Joan Kennedy. Until very recently, I did reside in Burlington. I moved out of Burlington at the end of July, but I did use Burlington talent to accomplish that. My real estate agent was Rose Manny, who's a town
Yep.
meeting member with me
Yep.
at the time, and my real estate closing attorney was Tom Murphy on the school committee. So as I left Burlington, I did utilize Burlington talent to make that happen
You
for
can't
me.
get away from Burlington.
Not really. I'm about 2 towns over. I'm in Reading, Massachusetts, right over the Woburn border, so it's a short jaunt up the street to come here, which is usually why most of the time I'm behind the camera directing. But I've enjoyed the time that I've spent on Burlington and Beyond. It's nice when I can get in front of the camera on occasion, and I love reminders to talk slowly. That's always very appreciated. It's been good. I love the town of Burlington. I do think there's much to commend it. It's a wonderful place to raise your family, and we've had so many guests, Pat, on the show that have talked about being in your pizza shop. From Brian Curtin to, I know, it's been charming, to Jim Tiggis, a whole bunch of individuals talking about what it was to grow up in the town and go get pizza, at your
Marino's, yeah.
Yeah, right, at your shop.
Yep.
So it's intriguing.
What's the value of the show to the community?
Well, I think, the title pretty much much says it all. It's Burlington and beyond. We have local town guests from all different, walks and persuasions of life. I remember I was a co-host with Steve Yetman, who's retired fire chief, and we've had a variety of individuals. We've had, I loved the Board of Health episode.
With Ed Weiner.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because
He's a bit of a comedian.
well, he's actually, for two doctors, him and Dr. Saltmarsh, remarkably funny individuals in a very droll sort of a way.
He is.
But
I agree.
very
I agree with you.
intriguing and
Yeah.
very funny. I never knew so much about the Board of Health.
Yeah.
You say Board of Health, and I'm like, oh my God, that's sort of like, the dog control officer. But it affects every aspect of life in Burlington,
Did
from
you
life
know-
sciences to the restaurants and to,
Yeah,
the lobster.
He's very, very. Did you know that he and I graduated the same high school, almost the same year?
I did not know that.
Yeah, we're. I think we're 3 years separated. Malden High School
Oh, wow.
in Malden, Massachusetts, not so far from here. Strange. I never suspected it. When I first saw him and I met him, I didn't know that. Little by little.
So
it
how
came
did you
out.
find out that you went to the same high school? Did he bring it
He
up?
mentioned something to do with his hometown at one point on the show, and and we got to talking about it, and so sure enough, we even remembered teachers that were there that we both had at the time. So
Well, that's always
it was a very pleasant find. You are a terrific addition to our show, whether you came a little bit later or not
Late-
does not
late to the
matter.
program.
You have been extremely dedicated, and I personally appreciate all that you have done, and I think I speak for the guys here too,
Yeah.
and we look forward to not always being behind the camera, but being here on the panel with us talking about, because you have great world experiences. Do you want to talk a little bit
About my world experience.
about your world experiences?
My passport doesn't have many stamps in it, but that being said,
No,
in
yeah,
terms of
you-
my day job,
Your
I-
day job,
I do work as an
your
attorney for
accomplishment.
the State Prison Bureau, so I do work for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. That gives me a certain public safety law enforcement interest by nature, but my husband and I at the time, we moved into Burlington, and it was a wonderful, wonderful community. We moved to Holly Glen, which was rather controversial in the beginning.
Okay.
As someone told me when I was on the Friends of Mary Cummings Park, he goes, we sued to stop your development. I'm like, well, that's nice. But then eventually when it was built, they wanted a resident from Holly Glen to participate. So that's why I found myself working with John Sachs. And,
Oh, yeah, John.
yeah, right,
yeah,
with the Friends of Mary
yeah,
Cummings Park.
yeah.
I'm still on that board. Yeah, as
Do you have
basically.
special thoughts about Burlington as now that you've
Well, I love
living
the
on
open
the
space.
edges
It's
there?
one of those things. I mean, Burlington is blessed. I mean, we always think Burlington Mall, and we think of all the high technology and the hospital and then the educational system here. But I mean, when you go out into the edges of Burlington, you have Mary Cummings Park, and at the other end, you have
Yep.
the landlocked forest.
Yep.
And so it's interesting. There is a lot of open space there, and just anecdotally, people reporting that they saw
Yep.
turkeys in their backyards and how many what is it called on the deer
Points.
points
Yeah.
on their
on the
horns,
points,
right?
yeah,
On their antlers, right?
I have to mention one other thing before we move on to
coyotes.
and that is that your contributions, both you and Larry, your contributions to people helping people,
Oh,
I
yes.
think they are very, well, all three of us, excuse me, I didn't mean to, but all three of you, your contributions have been significant in the past. I can remember many, many times when we were trying to jockey with one another, are you going to be available, can he make it and whatnot.
Right.
And we managed to fill the bill for how long? For a year and a half, 2
Couple
years?
years,
was
I'd
it?
say.
2
wasn't
years.
it?
I know I did
Yeah.
it for about 2 years.
2 years,
It's one
yeah.
of those things. I
And
think
then
it's
there
very
was-
important.
Then there was the pumpkin patch at the end,
I
and
like the
unloading the
pumpkin
patch. Yeah.
pumpkins, and all good stuff that speaks highly of the
Well,
four
I
of
think
us,
a
I
lot of
think.
people in the town of Burlington. It's a very kind town. I think people are very empathetic towards one
Why
another.
did you come to Burlington in the first place?
Well, actually, quality of life was one of the interests, definitely, at the time, and new construction.
Good
we
stuff.
were looking for a house with new construction at the time,
Yeah.
and we were downsizing from a Colonial in Winchester at the time,
Mm-hmm.
because it was a large house, and there was mostly we were kind of close to empty nesters at that point, because one son was in college and the other one was going to college as well. So the idea was to move into a much more,
Yeah,
you know.
and Burlington fit,
Oh,
and we're glad that it
very
did.
very much so. So, Yeah, you know, and
Taxes were a little lower.
definitely taxes are a little bit lower. Oh God, and Winchester has no commerce. I mean,
Yeah.
there's some day spas and a really D'Agostino's Deli is phenomenal. There's a very good bakery, but not much else, and a very good
Yeah.
bookstore, small
Yeah.
little community bookstore. But there's
Yeah.
not much to.
Small community.
Right. I mean, Winchester Hospital has a lot of land in
Yeah.
the town, and they don't pay taxes.
Let's move
So-
on to our next guest, Larry. Hi, welcome. And it's good news to hear that your wife is on the mend and doing well. I'm sure we're all very, very pleased to hear that. You have been on the show quite a few times. You have been a member of our town committee for quite a while. Tell us about yourself. Where do you come from? Why are you on why were you on the town committee, and what are you doing now, and where are you going, and what's happening?
I thought it was interesting that I had come from living 20 years in Waltham. I came to Burlington because it was kind of a country-ish town,
When?
and that looked great to me. The year 2000,
Okay.
and that was before they redeveloped downtown, Route 3A committee, etc. So it looked like a nice, quiet little city to not city yet.
Yeah.
We're almost there,
Yeah.
and I realize they're trying to push through legislation to make it a city.
Mm.
But even for the first 10 years, I had no idea that a Republican town committee met, that there was one. No one told me. Didn't see any advertisements. Finally, I got tired on the ballot. On a ballot, I saw that there was, vote for these Republican town committee members. And I had no idea what I was voting for. And I had to ask people at the election committee to tell me, what is this committee?
Wow.
And that's how I first got it started in the Burlington Town Republicans. And if anyone else is interested, has not heard of the Burlington Town Republican Committee, this would be a good place to point those questions. Get those
Contact any
questions
one
to
of
us. Yes, please. And we'd love to bring in. We'd love to have you. We'd love to show you what we're doing. We'd love to show you how we're promoting conservative values and values that most Americans hold. When we started the show, it was just another way to get a larger voice,
Mm-hmm.
both in the town, the state, and some national issues. I've had favorite shows that we've handled national, international issues, yet favorite shows where we have just focused in on this town. For example, interviewing the people from People Helping People. I think that was a good service to the town because many people don't know what People Helping People was all about,
Yep.
and all that they did,
Yep.
and all that they contributed, and how they help out other departments and charities.
Mm-hmm. But a lot of the guests that we've had, we have. Maybe you want to tell the audience. We've put a list of guests that we've had together, and we've got 87. A lot of them were people who were running on the conservative ticket through the years. There's a whole bunch of people, as well as other people from the community who were doing something for the community. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and about that, Pat, that's why I had liked the show, because Democrats pretty much run this state, and they pretty much run this town. You can't get anything happening without getting the approval of the Democratic Town Party. That's why I'd like to see a resurgence of the Republican Party. There's a lot of Republican values in town that people are just kind of living with the results of what town meeting does, what the selectmen decide to do, even though it doesn't represent them at all or what they would want to have happen.
Mm-hmm.
I was maybe a little bit more on the conservative side. I hated to see more and more business come in and encroach on the town, on the neighborhoods, heavier traffic. I think we've come through it all right, but I'm sorry to see more and more of that town-type atmosphere.
I got the impression. I remember a couple of meetings where a magnet. I remember Kristen Castner in particular talking about her name was known in some community in California because she was the point person for Burlington, Massachusetts, in attracting medical science, small medical.
Probably the life
Yeah.
science, what you're
Yeah.
talking about.
Yeah.
But just a word about that, about Kristen Kastner. She lives in a very small community right next to the coast. No chance of developing there. But she stated several times how she loves developing Burlington. She just loves bringing in businesses to Burlington. Meanwhile, she lives 30, 40 miles away in a small little town that's not going to be possible to have that type of development.
I think some
So
of it, though, is not just commercial business. I think some of it is
It's all development.
medical research. Is what I heard her talking about, but I'm sure that.
But you've seen it here how we've put in condominiums everywhere we can, unless it was going to be taken up by a place that, for business. Or,
Yeah. How do you feel about Burlington now, the way it's developed to this point?
I was sorry to see it go.
It's gone.
The town aspect of Burlington is pretty much gone.
That primitiveness.
It's still there with the town politics. People can get together and occasionally they may overrule the selectmen or occasionally may not take the advice of Ways and Means. But people who are moving to the town, I would recommend, and people in the town, get as involved as you can. It only takes 12 signatures to run for town meeting. 12 signatures. And you find out everything that's going on with the town. You'll get literature on it, you'll get phone calls, and you'll be one of the more knowledgeable people in town just for getting those 12 signatures. Highly recommend it. Other ways to get involved.
I second it. I think it would be terrific if we had more people. I wish I had more time. I wish I had more energy. I would love to run, but at this time in my life, I'm running out of gas.
You have a full schedule already.
Anyway.
Yeah.
All right.
Well,
Paul.
that's why we have Paul. He's
Yeah.
one of the younger people
Yeah.
with the energy.
Speaking of Paul,
youngster.
go ahead. Did you want to say some more? Anything else you want to?
Well,
And then
just-
we'll go back around.
The other type of guests I loved having on were people who were not mainstream or their opinions were not mainstream at the time. And such people were like Barbara LaRue, Ernie Zaplotsky, Steve Stam. They all had opinions, but they were minority opinions
Yeah.
and typically would get passed over. So I thought we did a real value to the town by bringing these people on, letting them know there are other points of views that are very strongly held, very strongly believed, and to get them advertised out there.
Yeah.
'Cause otherwise, you really don't hear. If you've heard of the issue, you don't hear the minority.
The other side of the story, right? Sadly, Steve Stan was quite ill. But yes, I do relish his vision, his thoughts, his comments, especially in town meeting. He's always up on his feet. Sandra Stotsky, she was on the show at one time.
We
She
had her on
was.
twice.
Twice,
I believe it was
yeah.
twice.
I don't know if I have her on that list. I
Yeah,
do.
she's
do,
on there.
You do have
Do
it around the
I
list.
have her on there? Okay.
And I had her down not as more entertaining, but more interesting.
Yeah.
She was just coming out with something totally different about Common Core that we had not heard before,
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think
which was very important
it
to get
also
out
speaks to the level of quality of guests we've had. I mean, she's nationally known on
She
the
is.
issue of Common Core,
Mm-hmm.
and
She
yet we
speaks
had her here in
nationwide on the
Burlington. So
there twice.
I
So-
should put her on the list and try to get her again.
doesn't hurt to
Yeah,
follow up.
where,
Yeah.
where is she local? Is she?
Somewhat local.
Do you know if I can?
Jamie Glass is the other person. I probably do have his contact.
Okay.
But I think they'd be easy enough to look up.
Okay.
But it would be interesting to get a follow-up on Common Core. Is it dying the death that we expected?
Okay. I'll do some looking. Are any of you familiar with Catherine White?
Yes, I'm very
Yes.
familiar with Catherine White.
Okay, you were the one who mentioned it, and
She's a
will-
constitutional
yeah,
expert.
she is. She's also a tax lawyer. And
Intriguing
she said,
woman.
"I'm busy," but she will. She's terrific.
She's a phenomenal
s-
public speaker and very intriguing guest, very engaging, very extremely
On the
knowledgeable
Constitution.
on the Constitution. Will take us through a walk, skip, and a jump through the Bill of Rights
I will chase
and
her.
and basically legal jurisprudence. She's remarkable in that regard.
Yeah.
Her breadth of information, having gone through 3 years of law school, and I do constitutional law on a daily basis for 29 years. She's phenomenal, better
Okay.
than many law professors.
Okay.
You could have Arthur Miller on, or
I think
or you
she-
can have her, and I think Catherine
yeah.
White would
No,
be.
I've spoken to her.
She's exceptional.
She simply threw up her hand. She said, "I'm busy right now. I can't be." So I will in the next coming weeks.
Paul
I
knows her
will-
as
I will-
well.
You know her.
Well, I'm familiar with her. I don't know her, but
Well, by
I
the
think
way,
I was the one who
speaking
gave
of-
you the
Next
her
individual
contact
here is
info.
Paul Gerard.
Yeah,
Most important, please. I'm sorry.
up to bat.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Who are you? What are you doing? And what?
Well, I've been a part of the show from the beginning here. So I grew up in Burlington, been here my whole life basically. Seen a lot of changes in town, as you have.
Yep.
It's still a great place to live. I think we've managed the growth pretty well, other than maybe I'm not a fan of the 3A overlay district, but overall I think we've kept the residential and the commercial separated pretty well. So I like Burlington a lot. I think it's still a great place to live, a little bit crowded, but still a great place. And the show's been great. We've had so many great guests on. I think it's been a real service to the community.
Anyone in particular come to mind? Any of the?
Well, I think one of the best ones that we just mentioned was the show
Yourself, right?
no.
Sorry, Pat.
The show on Common Core I thought was very informative with
Yeah.
Sandra Stotsky. There was a lot of good shows. We've had some great candidates on for state office, local offices.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you do, Paul?
I'm in the IT field,
Okay.
so I do Unix.
Have you been pretty much most of your life?
Pretty much, yeah. I'm doing Unix system administration. So I worked locally here on Wayside Road for a long time at Nokia. And then with the demise of Nokia, basically, I mean, they still exist, but not in the same field. But so I now work in Lexington at another company. So
Okay.
Yeah.
And enjoying that work.
it's local. I can, it's a short commute.
I want to encourage you to give your wife a plug. I think you should mention that lovely lady back there is producing this show.
Yes, yeah, she does a fantastic job. And
She simply does. And as a matter of fact, you and Joan, not so much, Larry and I on occasion, under duress maybe, we sort of either jump behind a camera or try to do something. But you two, Mary Ann and Frank here, who was running the camera, a great big thank you. They've been terrific. Mary Ann, thank you very much for what you do and what you have done. She's waving.
Back in the
Mary Ann is Paul's wife, Paul's lovely
Yeah.
wife.
that she is.
How long have you lived in Burlington? Pretty much how many years?
A long time. My parents moved here in '65, so
Okay.
about that long.
Big change.
Big change, right?
Big change. I can
change.
attest to it. Yeah, I think I've said a few times, and it always comes back to me. My mother, when I told her that we were building a home in Burlington, she said, "That's the frontier."
Right.
And it was the frontier at that time. It really was. No one knew anything about Burlington.
Right.
It was just a wooded area.
Right.
You know.
I
And
can remember when the
can
mall opened. I can remember when the grand opening of the mall. I remember that.
Yeah.
I remember before it was there, vaguely watching fireworks down there.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. I can remember when Skilton Lane was all dirt.
Yeah.
Literally dirt. In order to get back to my house, we had
A
to.
lot of changes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, Burlington has grown, significantly grown. I don't want to call it a city. It's still a town, but it has some of the aspects of a city at this point. We have problems. We have traffic problems. We still have growth. There's an argument as to whether it should be curtailed or not. I don't know. I don't think, when I hear someone like Steve Yetman, and I'm trying to reference some of these people,
Right.
for those of
Yes.
you out there who are watching, I was able to put a list together of all the guests that we have, and I come up with, out of 100 shows, I've come up with 87 guests that have actually been on the show. And in some instances, there were, 1 or 2 people or 3 people who happen to be on the show. And they come from a variety of different areas. Government, yes, there have been a lot of people who have been involved in government, but there also have been people who have been working privately, one thing or another, and also officials like Steve Yetman, who's head of the police, Michael Kent, who is, Steve Yetman is head of the fire department, I should say, who is about ready to retire. Michael Kent, who is our chief of police. Brendan Egan has been here for a few years now, I think. Anyway, I don't want to go down the list, but we've had and I think the reason I want to mention it, and some of you may want to comment on it, is because they are what makes the show. They are the people that make the show. If you're just tuning in this one time, or even if you've tuned in a few times, I can promise you, and I think they'll back me up, I can promise you that we're going to have a list of people who you will be very, very pleased to hear their message. They are accomplished individuals in and out of government. I think we tend to want to focus on government because we are a party that, a significant party of what Burlington is all about, and I think that is important. But we do go over to the social agenda frequently to bring in people who have expertise, and one of the individuals we were just talking about that is going to be hopefully coming on the show, someone that Joan knows well, is Catherine White, a commentator on the Constitution, one who is, from what I understand, is well versed on the ins and outs of the Constitution. We have lots of people are going to be coming. Certainly hope to see you in the future with regard to, how do you feel about, not the way Burlington is going, but I guess the argument of government, big government, little government, mayoral type situation, or should we stay the way we are with, how do you feel about town meeting? I guess that is the, you're a member still. Do you think, I mean, do we get everything across? Is it balanced?
It's obviously everybody has their own vote. It seems like almost everything gets approved fairly easily. So, you know, whether things should pass that easily or maybe they need further discussion, but it's hard sometimes. But I think some people do get frustrated that virtually everything that comes before town meeting gets passed. But, you know, everybody has their vote, and that's how it goes. So.
Yeah. The one on the plastic bags the last time was, they had to
That was
take
close.
an individual count.
Yep.
It was very, very close.
Yep.
There should probably be more issues like that. I voted, and I'm sorry about the way I voted on that issue. I made a mistake, and I'm willing to admit it, and I wish I could change it, but there's nothing I can do. And as a matter of fact, I think that whole plastic bag issue is about to hit us in the face soon.
From the state level, you mean?
I don't know exactly where it goes from once we approve it. But anyway.
It's already been approved. It has to become, I think the state has to approve it, and then it becomes law
Certify
at
the
that
ballot,
point. Yeah,
essentially?
something
Yeah,
to
and
that
then
Oh,
That's
okay,
right.
so
The
this
town
is only
ordinance
one
is
level of
thing.
approval.
No, it's been, a town meeting approved it, so now it just basically needs to go to, the state has to basically certify it or,
The election of it?
right,
Okay,
The
and
other
then
way.
it's instituted
yes. Yeah.
by the
The town.
people, by the town.
Yeah.
They make the rules on where you can buy and
Well,
when
the
you
rules
can
have already
use and
been,
whatnot.
we already voted on the rules, it's already
Yeah.
been made.
Getting down to guests, do you have one in particular that you,
Starting with me?
Joan, yeah.
I hope I don't steal Larry's thunder, but I would definitely say for political guests that were running for office, it was definitely Dr. Shiva.
Okay,
Very, very intriguing individual.
yeah, very
Initially, he
bright
started
guy.
as extremely smart.
Yeah,
The first time he was running for elected office, he was running as Republican against Elizabeth Warren.
right,
And then he shifted into an independent stature. And
Yeah.
that's happened with two of our guests. Alan Waters did the same thing initially
yeah,
when we had him as a candidate for a Republican candidate for elected office. And then he in turn chose to
Yeah.
go as a I don't want to say independent because that's its own party, essentially unenrolled
yeah.
to be an independent third party. But definitely Dr. Shiva. Very intriguing individual because he described his background, and he basically was almost raised to be a sort of child prodigy. But just his educational background, and when he first came to the United States, his perception of that, and the way his family came over, basically in dribs and drabs,
Yeah.
you know, emigrating lawfully,
Yeah.
and then based on the class division that's quite acute in India,
Yeah.
back in, you know,
Yeah.
their you know, country of emigration from which they emigrated, but you know, that they were considered the undesirables.
Yeah.
So it was intriguing to have him discuss when he goes to Harvard University,
Yeah.
a venerated institution,
Yeah.
and where basically all the other students that are Indian, because they come from a higher caste level, they won't even interact with him,
With him, yeah.
because they find
And
out
yet
his
he
last name, and that automatically triggers in them
Yeah.
the fact that he is an undesirable and not worth either even speaking to, deign to speak to him. So it was fascinating for him
And
to
here
say,
in America, he outdoes them.
well, exactly. So who did he bond with? He said, well,
Yeah.
I bonded with the
Yeah.
African American kids and the Hispanic kids because we were all different iterations of darkness in terms of our skin, but they didn't judge me.
Yeah.
I was allowed to do work on my merit, and he's, you know, he's part of the American dream. And then for him, you know, he started chasing well before Donald Trump as the presidential candidate ever did it, but he started chasing Elizabeth Warren about the fake Indian stuff.
Yes.
And it was a street.
Oh, did he
I
ever?
thought it was the height of funny and just
Yes.
amazing because
Yeah.
he's got deep pockets. Obviously, he's a multimillionaire.
Yeah.
You know, he took out these billboard ads on buses, and they were like
Yeah.
rolling all through Cambridge.
Yeah.
Now remember, this
Yeah.
woman lives on Brattle Street in Cambridge.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. No, yeah.
there's
he
nothing
did.
under $1 million
He
in
did-
Brattle
he did a
Street unless it's
whale of
someone's
a job.
doghouse. But anyways, you know, basically he made poking fun of her about her being a fake Indian, and the city of Cambridge took down the signs, and he sued them in federal district
Yep,
court. It
I
took him like
remember
2
that,
days
yeah.
to get the the preliminary injunction to stop them from doing that because he got a cease and desist order because they were squelching his First Amendment rights. Well, bravo to
Yes,
Dr.
I
Shiva.
agree,
And
I
so in
agree.
that sense, he's an intriguing
Yeah.
person. He makes you think more. And even just on a more global level too, talking about the opioid addiction, he has someone in his team when he was running for elected office that was also an MD of Indian descent
Yeah.
that had come up with a different treatment modality that doesn't involve a 28-day or 30-day dry out because they don't necessarily always work. One of our candidates for Attorney General actually talked about the opioid addiction issue with a great amount of insight. He was actually going against
Yes, Jay McMahon.
Ray
right?
J.
Jay
McMahon.
McMahon, yeah.
Jay McMahon, yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know,
I,
from
I,
100 different
I
angles.
found Shiva fascinating. I really did.
Well, he came on twice, consequently.
Yeah, yeah.
We like
Well,
to have him
first
back
time-
when
the
they go
first time-
independent.
The first time he couldn't make the show, he came, he appeared, he came with a bus and whatnot.
Right.
We all got to meet him, and but he couldn't make the show. I can't remember exactly why, but
The
he
second
did
time?
the second time, and
Right.
he was a fascinating
Yeah,
guest.
fascinating person.
Yeah. Larry, who have you got in mind? Anyone in particular that comes to mind that you were fascinated with?
Well, I thought he and Scott Lively did a very good job.
Okay.
Dr. Lively, okay.
Yeah. I think his last name spells it out, and I think he came in and wasn't afraid to mention some views that would go against the current views,
Yeah.
the establishment views. So I always like to get those viewpoints aired, let people hear some real arguments. Now, the other part of the show that I also liked is when we interviewed people from the town, like Marge McDonald, and we could go over all the benefits or all that they have to offer, all the council on aging has to offer,
Okay.
various people throughout
Yeah.
the town.
Yeah.
I thought, again, that was a very good show for people to listen to. There is all sorts of help,
Information.
and I don't think she even got into what I've experienced with my wife's illnesses.
Yeah.
They would come in and help fill out forms that turned out to be 100 pages. Council of Aging would come in and help fill those forms out for you. And there's countless number of forms based on the availability of programs. And they were all very helpful with that.
Yeah.
And so a little bit of kudos to the
Speaking of
Council on Aging.
helping, can you tell us a little bit about what you've done to help one of the guests that we had, People Helping People, their actual work? You and Joan in particular, and Paul as well. The three of you have been instrumental in helping them. What exactly do you do for them? What have you done for them?
Well, we volunteered to drive into Boston, to the Boston Food Bank and bring stuff out to the Burlington Food Bank as one of their sources of food. So I think they have
Was it a
about
lot of food, a little bit of food, something?
3 tons.
yeah, up
Two-
to 3
amount.
2 to
tons.
3 tons of food. So it
A
was a few
truckload,
pickup
pickup
trucks
truck, yeah.
Each trip,
and a small SUV.
and as I recall, it used to spill over from the truck onto a
No,
vehicle.
we'd
Your
never spill.
No
vehicle-
spilling, no spilling.
No
Spill
spillage.
over. No, no
Pat,
spillage. No, I
Nothing
there
was
wasn't
left on
enough room.
93
Is what I'm
North.
trying to express.
You mean
yeah.
overflow.
Yeah. But I thought
Extra
that was
vehicles.
a great thing that we, as a committee, was able to do. For how long?
Probably
Did
a
it for
couple of years. We
couple of
also
years.
helped with the pumpkin patch. We unloaded the truck. We
Yeah.
also staffed the pumpkin patch one
I-
weekend of the season.
Yeah.
The pumpkin patch was a lot of fun because you get to meet real people in the town.
Yeah.
You get to know who they are, watch their kids pick out pumpkins,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
part of the community.
I lost
being part of
one.
that.
I lost one pumpkin.
Did you pay for it?
One out of about 100, 150.
Did you pick it
I'm
up by
not
the
sure.
stem? We weren't supposed
Yeah,
to pick
no.
it up by
Well,
the stem.
they threw it. It was one of those 16-wheeler trucks that was loaded with,
Okay.
and they were coming like bullets, and trying to get it. I'm not that adept at doing that anymore. Paul, who do you think as a guest was pretty good? Interesting.
Oh, there's
that you've
been some good ones. I think the one on Common Core with Sandra Stotsky and Jamie Glass was probably one of the most
Yep.
informative. I believe we had them twice. There was a lot of good information there. I think the one with Mass Family Institute, Mike King, was great.
Yep.
A lot of good info there. We got some good feedback on that show and helped a local mother, I believe, with some issues she was having with their daughter. So we've had an effect, and
Yeah.
there've been
Yeah.
some great shows.
That is a testament to actually the fact the show works.
Yeah.
That we are able to help people.
Let me ask you this one too. How about the show with Burlington parents staying together? Do you recall that?
I don't.
It was some parents in Burlington who got together to figure out ways to keep their kids safer from drugs.
Oh, I remember that.
I
Remember that?
vaguely remember that.
That was
yeah.
very, very interesting.
Yeah.
It's important.
Parents getting together themselves without government,
Yeah.
Mhm.
but let's just figure out ways to protect our kids.
Mhm.
Yeah. That.
Very
yes,
informative, very
definitely
interesting.
valuable, yeah.
How about that show, Pat, that you had on recently with somebody from your church who was, is it
From where?
Tybor? This one here. You mentioned this one.
Tibor Varney.
Yes.
He's a fascinating case. God, I don't know. Yeah, he just came out of the public, and I have no idea how. His name is Tibor Varney. He was born in Hungary. He learned to play the violin well enough between the ages of 5 and 15. His father insisted that he be able to play well. He had all kinds of difficulty when the Russians moved into Budapest with the tanks. He ran. His father made him run, gave him a little bit of money. He had a rough time through the wooded area then that existed between there and the Polish or the German border, I'm not sure. Many of his comrades were shot. I remember him telling me the story that the Allies would fire green flares in the sky so they know which way to run to get to the border. The Russians would do the same thing. People would get confused, go back, and they would be shot. He got shot twice, once in the leg, once in the, I think he said the forearm. He bled, didn't even realize that he was in such panic to run. He picked up a little boy and helped him get to the border. At any rate, he managed to get to the Allied border. Something happened. He had to come back, and he got caught by the communists, and he was sent to Czechoslovakia, a camp. Anyway, to make a long story, very long story short, he ended up in Canada as an entertainer, playing the violin, traveled all over Canada, especially Montreal. Eventually was introduced to the Boston area by the lady who owned Cafe Budapest.
Okay,
which
yeah.
was a hangout
Excellent
for
restaurant.
for people who were, was a lovely, I've been there
Yeah.
a couple of times. It was
That's
a
how
lovely
Christmas
place
is.
in the Back Bay.
Yeah.
And he stayed there for something like 15, 20 years, and he retired from there. When I asked him how he came to Burlington, he just threw up his hands. He couldn't figure out, but he said that it was convenient for him. He ended up in Burlington. He was a very active member of St. Margaret's Church. Last Christmas Eve, in the middle of a program, I'm one of the participants in the choir. All of a sudden, our leader, Mr. Donahue, came over, grabbed the microphone, put it in the center of the loft where we're located, and here comes Tibor, 90 years old, grabs the microphone, unloosens it, handles it, and that's the thing that fascinated. You could tell he was a professional. The way he took that microphone, bent it, got it, fixed it just right, and he sang Ave Maria with the voice of maybe a 50, 55-year-old man. I couldn't believe it. I was so infatuated that I had to find out who he was. I did. He came to my home. We talked about his history. He left me a couple of discs, showed me pictures of his past and whatnot. He's extremely ill as we speak. He's 91 years old, very, very ill, living here in Burlington. I don't know exactly where he lives. Just one of those strange stories that come to pass from time to time. Tibor, if you are watching, I hope you're better. He and his wife, he is caring for his wife who is extremely ill, so the two of them are having a tough time.
Good wishes
Yeah,
and prayers.
Tibor.
And I can also mention too that most of our past shows are on YouTube. So if you just search for
Yeah.
Burlington and Beyond, you can find most of our past shows.
Yeah, yes, that's, I often wonder what kind of an audience, not what kind of an audience, but how much of an audience we have that is out there. And I suspect that even though the numbers here in Burlington may be reasonable or, you know, on the modest side, I think it's grown. I think it's grown over the years, not only here, but I think it's grown because of, in part because of YouTube. Somebody may have seen the show on YouTube and now they watch it locally. You never know. All kinds of possibilities.
Do you think we present unique information too, that otherwise is not presented?
Information that
Unique
people
information.
that, yeah, we do try. I have to tell you about the one character that interested me, that I found very interesting, was the guy who is the editor of this, the Boston
yeah, Lonnie.
Broadside, Lonnie Brennan. He was, and the reason I say that is because he was completely outspoken with his viewpoint. He held nothing back. Talked about the newspaper, how hard he worked at it, how he has a very conservative viewpoint, that the people that are on the paper, and that the paper is growing, is what I heard from him, and every bit of evidence. I'm one of the subscribers, and every bit of evidence that I get says that his newspaper is growing in Massachusetts. And this being an overwhelmingly liberal state, I think it's good. I think it's healthy. I think it's extremely good for another viewpoint. And I'm glad that he's out there doing it, and I hope he succeeds, and I will do my little bit to try and help him succeed. He's one of the people that I really enjoy. There have been so many. There have been so many, really. There are just so many. I'm sure all of you can think of someone else that you really, that you found interesting, even the ones that you mentioned, and they're just, I don't know if we mentioned this, but was able to put a list together with Chris Flaherty helped me because they have the records here at BCAT. But for 100 shows, we have compiled a list of 87, and this was up until right up through the last show was last week, I think it was. 87 guests that we have had. The first, do you remember the first 10 or so shows when John was here?
Yeah.
We used to huddle around a table and talk about the issues. How many shows did we do like that before we started inviting in guests? Do you remember?
About 6 to 10.
Yeah,
6 to 10,
roughly, yeah.
like that? And
'Cause
then
we all had a lot to say, and
okay.
it was our first time on.
But how did we get to the point to invite people in?
It might have been someone like Sandra Stotsky who just stood out there, or the girl with smart meters.
Okay.
But some
Someone
gripping,
suggested
someone who
that?
was an
some-
expert in their field, we
Yeah.
just brought them in to
Yeah.
educate
Probably
viewers.
the result of something that we happen to be talking about
Could
at the
be.
time. Yeah.
Well, I think it's important to acknowledge that everybody that's here on this panel today has run for elected office in the town of Burlington
Thank you.
one or more times. So when Larry points out that, you know, all it takes is for you to get 12 signatures from your neighbors, probably everybody in your little cul-de-sac or on the floor in your condominium building,
You're
get
right.
them to sign your papers and you too can run for elected office. It's a great way to learn about your town and to take a more active approach. I mean, I can say for my own purposes, I didn't become involved in politics until my sons were largely grown and in college. But, you know, when you find yourself, you know, deciding whether it should be golf or tennis, think about local politics. Think about getting engaged in your town and in getting involved in more civic and volunteer activities with people helping people or some other group in your church or in your neighborhood. You'll feel better about yourself. And, you know, golf and tennis can wait. You'll get around to it. But no, seriously, we've all run
No,
for elected
right.
office on more
Yeah.
than one occasion. And I think
Yeah.
that says
Yeah.
something about our interests and our vigor. And that's good stuff.
It is.
And it's not to pat ourselves on the back, it's to encourage everybody else out there. Okay, off you duff, off you go.
And Joan, just off of that, if you run for town meeting, that's 4 meetings a year, 4 nights a year that you're giving up.
Bring snack though, because the meetings can run till about 10 o'clock.
11
Bring snack
sometimes.
and water. Oh, jeez, I don't know if I ever quite got to 11.
You
Or 10:30.
preempted the very question. Does this show have civic value? And
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
You answered it
Next
very,
question.
very nicely. Yeah. Yeah. Larry, what do you think with regard? How much good are, you know, I don't even know if I can use the word good, but in terms of information, how much value have we imparted or do we try to impart?
Well, every time I think there was a significant issue on the town docket, we brought it up, we discussed it, we brought it out in the open. So again, otherwise people wouldn't have heard that. And I'm hoping we can only do more of that
Great. Yeah. I hope
and even
so.
educate additional town meeting members or people thinking about running for town meeting.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
they stay and watch the show, they'll learn quite a lot about what the issues are.
How do you feel about that, Paul? You think that do you pretty much agree with Larry, or do you have you know, what value are we here spending? And, you know, I'm sure the audience, well, they may or may not realize that there is a certain amount of work that has to go into preparing it. Not only here at BCAT Studios, a gentleman like Frank Reyes, who volunteers his time to work the camera for us. We couldn't function without it. Mary Ann, your wife, who is currently producing the show, and that has to go on for each and every show that we put on, as well as get and schedule a guest or possible guests to come in to be here. There's always the interruption that says, oh, I can't make, and this has happened, I can't make that show at last minute, and you try to, you know, to shuffle the deck and see if you can't come up with someone else. Or there's the one that you chase and is always elusive, always not
The big
quite,
kahuna,
not quite. Yeah,
Moby Dick,
yeah, yes. and you know,
great white
and
whale.
I personally can attest to at least a half dozen phone calls to Catherine White, who is going to be one of our guests in the near. I'm putting her on notice on live here because she has promised. She is, as Joan told us a few minutes ago, is a terrific constitutional expert who will be joining us. I don't know when. Anyway, I will get into that after a bit. What other thoughts do you have with regard to what we should be doing or what we could be doing?
Well, I think
here?
that'd be a good question to ask our audience. And maybe they could call in or leave a message. What else
Oh,
could
that's
we be
another-
doing? Do you have any guests out there that you would like us to interview? On top of that, any other suggestions? Do you want to be able to have a call-in format?
Oh, yes.
So you can call up, ask your questions, and the panel will be here to respond. Would people enjoy that? Well, we'd like to hear back from them.
Yeah.
You can also look us up on Facebook too, Burlington and Beyond on Facebook. So that's a good way to leave us a comment.
Yeah. And how do they pull up an old show? How do they get an old show? The best bet is to go on
Go on
Facebook?
YouTube
On YouTube.
and
Okay.
search for Burlington and Beyond.
Yeah. I've been on there and I've seen, I think probably 7 or 8 that are on there, but I didn't know. I don't know if I exhausted it or not, but they were good reproductions. I mean,
Yeah.
they were good and live. There were nothing fuzzy or anything like that. Do you think we should encourage, as you indicated just a moment ago, comments to BCAT with regard to the show? I don't know if I haven't heard anything from Jen with regard. Yes, I have, going way back. On a couple of occasions, she has indicated that there were signs. They have no way of measuring the actual audience that is actually, that is watching. There's no way of telling. They get feedback, is my understanding. And I remember talking to Jen, the what is her title? Manager of the director, I guess. And she indicated that there were some signs that people were watching. There is the kind of show, as a matter of fact, one of, not my competitor, but a gentleman who does another show for BCAT, and they have the same people on. I like the notion of searching out into the public, or searching the public, I should say, grammatically, to find people, as Larry indicated a moment ago, people of interest who can bring something of value to, as opposed to the four of us just sitting here.
Oh, sure. Well, we've done that. If you look at this list, we've had quite a variety of
Yeah.
people.
Read some of them, Paul.
Oh, there's a lot of them.
Anyone, any of the people that come to mind? That you
Ones
think-
that haven't been mentioned so far, Brian Curtin, Chris Hannafin, Heidi Wellman, Jeff Deal,
Yeah.
Kevin Duffy, Paul Raymond, Carlos Hernandez. A lot of, there's so many of them.
Number 21 was an interesting guest.
Yeah.
She was a great guest at the time. Okay.
So was number 28.
Number 28. Oh yes,
Santa
number
Claus,
28.
Santa Claus.
Number 28 was Santa Claus, and he may still be he loved it here so much, he may still be roaming the halls of BCAT here. I don't know. Don't know for sure.
But let me just add this too, in addition to the guests, with us all being at least town meeting members, we had to stay up on the issues.
Yes.
We had to be knowledgeable.
Yes.
So
Good
don't want to
point.
overlook the knowledge base that we also brought to the table.
Yeah. Had to be able to ask the right questions in order to get the best information out from some of the people. Santa Claus was a special guest. As a matter of fact, he was a guest for, I think, for 3 years. 2 or 3 years he was. He made it a point of coming here. What would you like to tell the audience about? I don't mean to get personal, but what would you like to tell the audience about yourself? That is something that you do, something that someplace that you've been, something that speaks to you as a person. Anything that special comes to mind?
Things that people ordinarily would not know about me.
Yeah,
Okay.
and would find very interesting about you. Each of us, not just you.
I trained to be a yoga teacher, but I don't currently teach.
You
Yeah.
train? I didn't know. You trained to
I
be a
trained
yoga
I
teacher?
trained to be a yoga teacher. I got my certification. The funniest thing is a male friend of mine here in town said to me, he goes, "Oh, Joan, that's going to be interesting, training." And he said, "You'll probably find yourself the oldest person in class." I pretty much was. I could have been everybody's mother in that class. Most of the young
That's
women
very
that were
interesting.
training with me were 26 and, having a son that was, a year older. I'm like, but for the grace of God, these young women could have been my daughter in theory. So, yeah, so that's been intriguing. So
Good
that's
for
something
you.
that's a little off.
Good for you.
And
Do
most
you use
people don't
yoga
know
now
about me.
yourself?
I practice yoga pretty much on a daily basis. I usually go to classes. I don't teach currently. I'm thinking of starting something in my office, though. Some of my colleagues have approached me and said, "Hey," I said, "Well, okay. If I can get you to sign a liability waiver." Since I would be teaching other lawyers and paralegals, I'm going to make them sign the waiver first. But yeah, I might teach in my own office. So
Good for you.
I got to talk to
That's
my
great.
my boss first on that. So
Yeah.
something that people don't know about me.
Yeah.
There you go.
That's interesting, very interesting. Larry, how about you?
No, I don't teach yoga.
Oh, come on. I know you don't teach yoga.
Okay. How about chess?
What is there that you have done, like to do, want to do?
Let me say again why I've enjoyed the show.
Okay.
Because you study the town issues, the state issues, national issues, and you really don't have many people with that same viewpoint
Yeah.
that you gain by studying the issues yourself. So much of the discussion of issues is based on what's said on the news,
Yeah.
what's sometimes in the newspaper, although nowadays it's what's online.
Mm.
And all that's being
True.
very heavily censored. So I appreciate the opportunity to share what we learned through our own investigations, our own looking at the issues, being able to share it with everyone else in the town, in Burlington and beyond.
Terrific remark. Yep, very good. Paul, what do you think?
What do I think?
Yeah. No, I mean, how do what value do we?
Oh, it's tremendous value. I think just the fact that some of the guests we've had, and you know, a lot of people may not sit through watch a televised meeting, town meeting, as far as like a selectman meeting or some
Yeah.
issue that's present, but they may tune in and watch and get, you know, find out what's going on when we discuss that issue. That's a local town issue, and get a better understanding of it than if they had to sit and watch a long meeting.
Mhm.
So I think it has a lot of value to it. It's just
Tell
one
us-
example.
Tell us something about yourself. What do you like to do when you're, you know, when you get the time?
All sorts
Sort
of
a
things. I have a
hobby.
lot of hobbies, but
A lot of hobbies,
yeah.
for example.
I like to
Musician.
play guitar. I wrote the
Oh,
theme song for the
I
show.
didn't know that. And when are we going to hear you?
Well, you hear it every time the show starts
Oh,
and ends.
that's right. Yes, okay. Yeah, but that's only one,
Right.
you know,
Oh.
one set of string.
Yeah.
We want to hear more. So you have to come in one of these nights
Yeah,
and,
could do
and
that.
Play guitar.
entertain us. So yeah, I mean, you know, live.
Yeah, we could do that.
Okay, I
Yeah.
won't forget.
Okay.
How long?
How about you?
What do I do?
You teach languages?
Yes. How many languages do
I-
you speak?
I have taught French, extensively, Italian, extensively, German, to a small. How much?
One.
1 minute. Oh, okay. Anyway, let's forget about me. We've talked about me in the past. A closing message to the audience.
I'd like to thank a lot of our local town politicians and also citizens that have participated in our shows. It's been great to have people come on our show, be willing to, you know, talk for 10 or 15 minutes or a half an hour and address issues that come before them, whether they're in the selectman role or in an appointed position like the chief of police or the fire chief.
Yeah.
And it's been intriguing. And you also get a human aspect from individuals, and you
Yes.
get to hear like where they were on 9/11 and how they responded in their civic role and then also in their personal role.
Yeah.
And, you know, even Hurricane Katrina, things like that. I didn't know that Steve Yetman went down there
Yeah.
to work as a first responder, but
Yeah.
being on the show, we found that
Yeah.
out.
Hogan
So
did.
I like people's
Yeah.
humanity.
Larry.
Gonna wrap it up.
Well, why
Leave
don't
it.
you
Gotta
wrap it up?
All I can say is thank you. Thank you so very much for joining us, and look for us in the future. We have a tremendous number of wonderful guests coming on the show. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
And
Good night.
from
Thank
all
you.
of us.
Thank you for 100 shows.